hello. It's so wonderful to look out in this room and see all these faces. And when you hear the rest of my talk, you'll understand how resonant this is for me. It's so, very moving. And I thank KACF so much for hosting this lunch, having us all here, and for allowing me to speak with you today. This is a huge privilege, so thank you. My name is Katie Benner, and I'm a features writer at the New York Times. And I will say I've had a very long and winding career as a reporter. I've covered business and technology, Silicon Valley, issues like gender discrimination and the Justice Department and national security. So a little bit of everything. And these are very big issues, but I think that my favorite stories took the knowledge of big systems and let me drill down to see how those forces were playing out on the lives of individuals. Much sort of smaller scale stories than what Apple was doing, but I think no less important. A story about the fight of a security guard who was seeking justice after being sexually abused in a powerful workplace. She worked for the US government and she was not able to get any justice. The misunderstood battles of women who were trying to escape domestic violence, an issue that really impacts so many, but we're so ashamed to talk about. Or Black children who made up stories about their lives, who leaned into the most awful stereotypes of Black America, and then submitted them in their college applications because they had no hope that their high test scores would get them into any schools. And they thought this was the only way to get a white admissions officer to look at me. So I am excited to talk to you about how being Korean American has shaped this work, because it really has. But before I dive in, I think I should let you know that this is the kind of event that used to make me pretty uncomfortable. Because even though I'm Korean, and even though I was born in Seoul, I am an adoptee. It's one of the many reasons people have no idea that I'm Korean, because my last name is Benner, which is not really, it's not one of the most common last names in Korea. And so I spent a lot of my life wondering what it meant to be Korean and wondering whether or not that identity mattered at all. Because when I was 5 months old, I came to the United States. I spent my childhood and college years in rural New England, which, as Karen knows, is very white. She just gave us a really good breakdown of that. The only other Korean person I knew was another adoptee, and his name was Joey. And we never spoke to one another. We never wanted to be in the same place. We tried so hard to pretend the other person didn't exist, because I think that we were worried that if we stood too near, our Asianness would overwhelm our small town, and the place would explode. I don't know, but we knew that we couldn't be near one another because then we couldn't really pretend to be white. And that's what we were really trying to do. And I don't think it was as cynical as that. We weren't pretending, but everyone we knew was white. Our families, the people we loved the most are white. The people who we spent all of our time with are white. And I will say that the highest compliment that he and I ever got was, "You're just like us. We can't even tell that you're Chinese." And we're like, okay, great, it's wonderful. So I wasn't sure what to do about all these stereotypes of Asian people because I was consuming them much like a white American would consume them, right? I was seeing it all play out on television and in movies and in the news, and so I was like, okay, if I'm going to jump into this Korean thing, I guess I'm a model minority, or am I a job stealer stealing auto jobs? This was the 70s and 80s, I'm old, but am I stealing jobs in Detroit? Am I a mathlete, which I actually was? Am I shy and retiring? Do I not speak out? Because these seem to be my only options. And they were all actually pretty unsatisfactory with the exception of doing well in math, which I still love and I am glad that I did. Anyway, so this is sort of my consummate problem. I don't know what I'm gonna do because I know that I'm an outsider. And I know that I'm an outsider for reasons that have nothing to do with being Asian. My family was quite poor. I grew up very, very blue collar. My dad, because he worked in a factory, lost his job so many times. We had so little money that we also were outsiders, but it just wasn't adding up. How am I going to be a person in this world? So of course what I did as a child and in college is I took all those questions and I shoved them down and repressed them, which I'm actually told is a quite Korean thing to do, so I was already well on my way. So fast forward to 2000, and I've moved to Beijing, I had been working as a waitress in Maine. As the folks at my table will tell you, I still have very good waitressing skills. I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and a close friend had gotten a scholarship, a fellowship, Princeton in Asia, very prestigious. And he was like, just come teach English and figure out your life, because otherwise you're just going to be a waitress in Maine for the rest of your life. And I said, that's not bad, but I will try out Beijing. I bought a one-way ticket, and I figured I'd figure out my way home. So it was while I was in the Wangfujing Mall, which some of you may have visited when you were in the city, that I was on the top floor where all the sale racks were, and I looked down 6 floors, and all I saw were people who looked a lot like me, and this had never happened before. Everybody had black hair. Everybody kind of had my face. And it was wild because every stereotype about Asian people I had, that I didn't even know I had, kind of came flooding through my head. Some good, some bad. Basically, everything that I'd felt about myself as a kid that made me feel uncomfortable, importing them onto this group of people for whom obviously none of these things had anything, who had nothing in common with any of these stereotypes. They were the majority in Beijing. Chinese people are the majority in China. And so I'm standing there looking at 6 floors, just like this room, looking out and just thinking to myself, what do I actually think of myself, and what do I think of any of these people? And it was extremely startling and a little bit destabilizing. And so I started thinking more about what it meant to be both an American, because it was 2000, 2004 was when I was there, so there were a lot of questions for me about Americanness, and what it meant to be Asian. At the same time, I started working as a freelance reporter, so I was already asking a lot of questions, and journalism just felt like a good place to put curiosity about my internal questions and the outside world. The thing about being an expat reporter, though, is it's so easy to think that you know things when you don't. Everything's new when you're an expat, and some of you might have experienced this yourselves. People think, oh, because I talked to 5 cab drivers, I now know the difference between a Japanese person and a Korean person and a Chinese person. Unfortunately, that's not true, because then journalism would be really easy. But that is a place to get stuck. And as I was trying to push through that, I realized that I had gotten stuck there for myself. And I'd coasted by there for a long time. But as I became more invested in a career as a reporter, I just felt like being on the surface of things wasn't going to work anymore. You cannot write a good story unless you can go beyond assumptions about what it means to be one kind of person or another. So I started to ask, what is happening that's less familiar, more uncomfortable, but probably more true? And it was natural that I started thinking of myself that way too. I wanted to get to know more Korean people when I moved back to the US, so I could challenge some of these assumptions about them and about me and figure out how I fit in and whether or not that was going to be possible, even though I didn't and still don't speak Korean, but I really want to take lessons. I feel like that's my goal for when I turn 50, is to be able to speak Korean. But I wanted to figure out a way to feel Korean and understand in a new way what that was going to be. And one of the things that I found is that everybody I met, whether or not they were adopted, was also trying to find a sense of belonging. And it was really interesting to me, and I'd found that in so many communities that I reported on, whether it was, communities who had been spied on by the federal government who felt violated, or whether it was women who were working in the tech industry who felt like they were getting pens thrown at them and they did not understand what was going on. Everybody wanted that sense of belonging, and it created this extremely, I found, touching commonality and a place to really tap into, both as a reporter when I'm trying to get people to explain something to me that maybe they don't feel incentivized to explain, and when I'm also trying to figure out why I do the things I do and why somebody else does the things they do. Right, when we were also all navigating the identities we'd been given and what we were supposed to be. So I've been thinking about these traditions a lot. I think they build culture. I think they build a sense of community to have a strong belief in what someone's supposed to be. I also think those scripts have given us, a sense of real wholeness. And I really did kind of lean into them as I was trying to become more Korean. I let people assume things about me that weren't true. That my parents were doctors, or that I'd done well in college, which I didn't. I failed out of college, but whatever. I leaned into the idea that people were going to bestow things on me that I didn't have, just because I was trying them on like an outfit. But eventually, I kind of saw that it doesn't work for anybody. It didn't work for me, and it wasn't working for the other Korean people I met. It wasn't working for other minorities that I met to try to live within these confines. And it was just making it too hard to celebrate ourselves as individuals, to be as free as we wanted to be, and to celebrate what made us different, even within our group. And then, as I was reporting on some of these social issues, like domestic violence, like homelessness, like poverty, I found that it actually made it even harder for some groups of people, including Asian communities, to really tackle hard issues like gender inequality, domestic abuse, poverty, in part because it was not part of the surface of what it meant to be Asian. And it was a quiet struggle, and one that people wanted to take up alone. And it always made me feel like they didn't have to. We don't have to. I didn't have to in a lot of my struggles, and yet I did. And so were all these communities. It's one of the reasons I love KACF, because they're piercing that veil. This is an organization that's going out into the community and saying, what are the things that are beyond the surface where people really need us? We don't really want to talk about it, but we want to give the aid, because someday, when enough people are empowered, they will be able to tell their own story, and they'll be able to talk about what it was like to grow up and overcome a really difficult and devastating problem, and not feel hemmed in by an expectation or the surface of things. And so I feel like that is really the thing about exploring my own Koreanness and Korean identity that has helped both with my reporting and has helped me as I try to understand people more generally who are Korean and beyond the community. One of the privileges of being a reporter is having these tools, having this power to help a broad audience understand people and communities that they might not otherwise encounter. And we're supposed to tell these stories with accuracy and nuance and truth, and hope that it empowers and enlightens. And the work always includes a push and pull between what we see and what is hidden, between the worlds that we expect and between what's really going on. And then after the story's published, our readers get to ask, how big can we as Americans be together? How can we make our community whole in our workplaces, our houses of worship, and even here in this room, even when pieces of it startle us, disappoint us, or scare us? How can we continue to integrate that into the story of ourselves in a caring and generous manner? And how can we see aspects of our community both fail and succeed and want to take part in it? And as a reporter, that's what I really hope that people take away from some of these stories. So, we're all striving and trying to find the best parts of ourselves and to reconcile with the parts of ourselves that are still mysterious or that don't seem to fit. We're still trying to find ways that we are in a community but not of the community. And we're still hopeful, and I think I look out at this room and I can see it happening, we're still hopeful that all of the people around us in whatever community we're in, whether it's our Korean community, whether it's our communities at work, whether it's our communities with our kids, other basketball team mates, that we're all also trying to figure out how to continue to love and care for the people who are in our communities who are struggling, who are not like us, or who have not yet figured out how to be like us. So I thank you so much for having me. I love that I got to be here to speak with you. I've never spoken about my personal life really ever, and I only did it for KACF, and I'll never do it again. But I appreciate you. And thank you so, so much. I hope you enjoy your lunch.